Yo, howdy! Here we go again with another Louis L'Amour book review. I'm Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown, all published by Simon & Schuster Saga Press. You know I got a huge Louis L'Amour collection. If you've watched my library videos, you've seen it. Sometimes for these Louis L'Amour book reviews, I trot the whole collection down into my video recording studio and set them up. I just brought a few down. You know, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, people. Can't do it every time for you. We're going to be reviewing The Shadow Riders by Louis L'Amour. You know, we always start out with a review of the cover artwork because I love the cover artwork on these Louis L'Amour books, you know, especially the older versions that were done in the 80s, the 70s, 80s, and 90s. This is a illustration of some cowboys done by the illustrator Lou Glanzman. The Shadow Riders was published by Louis L'Amour in 1982, so it was one of the books he wrote towards the end of his career. There was also a movie made of this book called The Shadow Riders, starring Tom Selleck and Sam Elliott as the Traven brothers, Mac and Dar Traven. Now these cats, they just came back from the Civil War, and they fought on opposite sides. And they're coming back to their homestead from the Civil War. And this is the thing, is when you read Louis L'Amour novels, you learn a lot about history. And we get to learn a lot about Civil War history here, especially the aftermath of Civil War and what happened to these people that fought in the Civil War when they got back home, especially if some of them were family members that fought on opposite sides in the war. Well, these brothers, Mac and Dar, they got some differences between them, but generally they're good dudes, both of them good dudes. And they come back to Corpus Christi, Texas, where their ranch is. And if you know anything about, and Louis L'Amour does a great job of describing what it's like after the Civil War for some of these people. For instance, it was lawless. The South was a lawless place, and it gave rise to terrorists like Jesse James and his gang. And these people, these cowboys, these gunslingers, these thieves and assassins that roamed the South and the Southwest right after the Civil War, man, they were bad dudes. They were not nice people, especially if they were Southerners and they just got their ass kicked by the Northerners in the war. They were especially angry, like people like Jesse James, who, if you know anything about Jesse James, I mean, the guy was he was like the ISIS of the Old West. He was brutal. He was not a glorified Western gunslinger at all, man. This guy was a straight-up murderous, bad guy killer, and so was all of his gang. And these two brothers, Mac and Dar Traven, they come home from the Civil War facing a lot of dudes, bad dudes in Corpus Christi, Texas, and down there in southern Texas that are a lot like Jesse James. And so they get back to their homestead in Corpus Christi, and nothing's left. Their families have been kidnapped and taken away from them. Their wives have been kidnapped and taken away. And thus we get a revenge story. And that's what The Shadow Riders is all about. It's about these two Civil War brothers who fought on opposite sides of the war, coming home to find that their entire life has been stolen from them by a-holes and murderous thugs, like similar to Jesse James. And so that's where we go. That's where we're headed in this story. And I gotta tell you, it's good. It's like one of those things, if you like those movies like The Outlaw Josie Wales or any of that kind of stuff, you're gonna love this. It's another one of Louis L'Amour's great novels. Now, I'm going to review every novel of his. Not like I'm gonna be 100 Louis L'Amour book reviews by the time I'm done. I think the ones that I read prior to this I liked a little bit more. This one's still good. Like, they're all good. They're all good. I think I would give this one about a 7.5 out of 10. It's a good story. It's a brutal story. It's a heartbreaking story. It's a story about just two decent guys that fought in the Civil War that come home and find everything's a wreck and the evil people have taken over. The Shadow Riders, if you want to read a good revenge story, a good quest story about cowboys going off to find their loved ones and make things right, this is a good place to start with the Shadow Riders. Well, you can go watch the movie with Tom Selleck and Sam Elliott. I suggest both. Actually, I've never seen the movie. I don't know if it's good or not. The book, though, however, is a 7.5. All right? There we go.